The Wildcat fighter shuddered violently as cannon bursts ripped through its tail. Lieutenant Commander Jimmy Thach could only watch, helpless and horrified, as his wingman's aircraft broke apart under the relentless fire of a Japanese Zero. Through the smoke, the enemy climbed upward with terrifying ease, already preparing for another deadly pass. This is the story of the man who outsmarted the Zero. This is the story of the Thach Weave, and the night American pilots learned they didn't have to die. It was May 1942, and American aviators were being slaughtered in air-to-air duels. They weren't losing because they lacked courage. They were losing because they had no chance. But Thach had predicted this moment long before the Pacific War even began. Back in September 1941, a classified intelligence report had landed on his desk. A warning so alarming it chilled every veteran pilot in the United States Navy. The report described Japan's new fighter, the Mitsubishi A6M Zero, a machine so light, so fast, and so impossibly agile that it rendered American aircraft obsolete. Before the first battle, the Zero could outturn, outclimb, and outmaneuver every fighter the US Navy possessed. The math was brutal. In a turning dogfight, the Zero could bring its guns to bear while American pilots were still struggling just to complete their turn. Many Wildcat pilots never saw the shot that killed them. For Thach, this wasn't just a tactical nightmare. It was personal. His men would soon fly into battles where their aircraft were inferior in every measurable way, and he knew exactly what that meant. That September, Thach sat alone in his office at Naval Air Station San Diego, staring at the harsh performance figures printed in the intelligence bulletin. The Zero climbed faster than 5,000 feet per minute. It ranged more than 1,200 miles. Its turning radius seemed impossibly tight. Every metric showed the F4F Wildcat being outclassed. He read the report twice, then he brought it home that night, unable to shake the implications. At his quiet home in Coronado, long after his family had gone to bed, Thach sat at the kitchen table with a box of matchsticks beside him. Each matchstick represented an aircraft. He slid them across the wooden surface, testing angles, spacing, timing. He was trying to solve an equation that shouldn't have had an answer. How do you defeat a superior machine with inferior ones? Night after night, he experimented alone, while the sound of Pacific surf rolled outside his window. Sometimes his wife woke in the early morning hours to find him still there, murmuring about turn radii and attack geometry like a man possessed. Every conventional tactic failed. Close formation, the Zero carved them apart. Spread out. They were picked off one by one. World War I maneuvers. Utterly useless. Thach realized the truth. He needed a tactic that depended not on aircraft performance, but on teamwork. He placed two matchsticks side by side, spaced precisely. Then he simulated an attack from behind. Suddenly something worked. Both fighters turned toward each other in a crossing motion weave. It forced the attacker straight into a trap. He called it the beam defense position. His fellow pilots would later rename it something simpler and legendary: the Thach Weave. Two fighters flying parallel, roughly 1,500 feet apart. When one came under attack, both turned inward, crossing over like scissors cutting through the air. A Zero chasing one Wildcat would suddenly find itself staring into the guns of the other. Simple, elegant, and, if flown perfectly, absolutely deadly. Before the war erupted, Thach needed to know whether it actually worked. So in early 1942, he called upon one of his best pilots, Ensign Edward Butch O'Hare, a brilliant flyer and sharpshooter who would soon become America's first ace of the war. Over San Diego, their Wildcat groups simulated dogfights. O'Hare attacked again and again from every angle he could imagine, but each time, the Weave forced him to break off. "Skipper, it really works," he said after landing. "I couldn't fire without staring straight into one of your guns." A few months later, battle came for real. American bombers were being slaughtered within minutes. Thach ordered his pilots into the Weave. His wingman, Ensign Bob Dibb, turned toward him as the Zeros closed in. The two Wildcats crossed paths perfectly, and Thach fired a burst straight into the belly of an incoming Zero. The Japanese fighter erupted in flames and spiraled downward. Another Zero dove in, again Thach and his men, Weave covering each other's blind spots. Within minutes, 3 enemy fighters were down, and not a single Wildcat had been lost. The tactics spread like wildfire across the Navy. Pilots who once dreaded the Zero now had a way to survive and even win. Marine aviators at Guadalcanal used it daily, often against overwhelming numbers. Even Japanese aces like Saburo Sake later admitted they were baffled. Every time they lined up a shot, another Wildcat suddenly appeared in front of them, guns blazing. For the first time, Zero pilots were forced into fights they did not control. The Americans had turned teamwork into a weapon. The entire geometry of air combat had changed forever. By 1943, the Navy fielded newer, faster aircraft like the Hellcat and Corsair, but the Weave remained at the core of U.S. tactics. It required no radio, only trust, only timing. A pilot simply turned toward his wingman when threatened. The maneuver saved countless lives and became foundational for future aviators. The Army Air Forces adopted the same principle for their P-38 Lightnings and P-40 Warhawks. Even after World War II, coordinated defensive turns remained essential. During the Vietnam War, F-4 Phantom pilots used a modernized form of the Thach Weave to counter enemy MiGs. For John Thach, it was never about fame. He rose through the ranks, eventually becoming a full admiral and shaping Navy tactics for decades. In 1984, the USS Thach was commissioned in his honor, a fitting tribute to a man who turned desperation into innovation. But his greatest legacy wasn't a ship, nor a medal. It was the simple truth he discovered with a box of matchsticks. Superior tactics can defeat superior technology. The Thach Weave proved that teamwork, preparation, and creativity could change the course of war. John Thach passed away in 1981, buried overlooking the same Pacific Ocean where his pilots once fought and survived because of his idea. 80 years later, fighter squadrons around the world still study his tactic. Modern jets like the F-22 and F-35 operate using principles that trace directly back to those matchsticks on a kitchen table in 1941. In the end, the Thach Weave wasn't just a maneuver. It was a symbol of American ingenuity, a reminder that when the odds are impossible, victory belongs not to the strongest machine, but to the smartest mind. If you're loving stories like this and want to explore more about innovation and creativity, make sure to smash that subscribe button. Join us on this awesome journey and stay in the loop with all the fantastic content we've got coming your way.